research company this research institute has been around for many years, decades. And when I started digging into their archives, I came across something labeled as Project 13. Project 13 dealt with the 13th chromosome. The 13th chromosome, let me get my numbers right. It is actually only made up of about 4.5 to 5% of the entire human DNA. But this chromosome, what it deals with, I'm just going to name off a few. This is the chromosome that they are labeling is responsible for such thing as multiple personality disorder, bipolar, borderline personality disorder, Asperger's, autism. Now, these diagnoses are common diagnoses that happen with super soldiers and other people that were involved under Mark Ultra. These are the designated diagnosis that standard doctors will get because they will not believe, or the whole alternate personality thing that was genetically engineered is, that's science fiction to them. I started digging a little bit deeper into this, and once I did, these documents that I had found, unfortunately, I wish I should have saved them at the time, but they are no longer on this institute's website. Now, what does this lead up to Project 13? Here is where it's a little bit more on the theoretical side, but I have shared this with quite a few other people that I am connected with that were subjects of Mark Ultra, and everyone had a very adverse reaction when I explained this to them, and that is enough to tell me that something hit deep with them. When you are split, as I have said before, there are quite a few methods that they use for splitting you into alters. Psychotropic drugs, electroshock, waterboarding, even targeting a phobia that they discover, if that is even so much as maybe, hanging you from a high place or putting you in a box and putting a bunch of reptiles and toads in the box and having you sit there for a long time when you're 4 years old. What happens is there is a reaction that happens on the DNA level where your mind has two choices. You either die from shock or the pain, or your mind actually creates a new personality, a new alter. And then when you're in that alter, when you switch back to your regular self, you don't remember the torture, you don't remember the pain. It has become very prevalent to me that this very well, this chromosome 13 had been discovered a lot longer than before in the records I've seen, and that this was indeed the chromosome that they had to hone in on. Now, how they did that, I don't know. Did the psychotropic drugs, was there a certain cocktail that was used for, helping induce that? I don't honestly know. But what I can tell you is that autism and Asperger's is falsely diagnosed on many, many occasions. The reason there's a false diagnosis is because that is yet another way that they will give this kind of said diagnosis to the parents of a very young child, usually before 3 years old, and then the next thing you know, these doctors, these psychologists come and say, well, we want to evaluate your child, or they need to go to a special institute. A lot of these children that have Asperger's and autisms don't actually have Asperger's and autism. Again, this is under the chromosome, the 13th chromosome, under the Project 13, under the documents I read. I'm sure a lot of your listeners, if not all of them, are aware with the terms of indigo child, crystal child, starseed. A lot of the kids that are indigos, crystal child, starseeds are very, very gifted. They have abilities. They have extreme intelligence. A lot of them are contactees. It's happening more and more. A lot of these kids get the diagnosis of Asperger's, autisms, or even ADHD, ADD, things like that. So
thank you for mentioning that right there.
Yeah.
The ADHD. I'm sure there's. I hate to cut you off. I'm sorry about that. But I'm sure there's plenty of listeners out there who have children, or even themselves have been diagnosed with autism, ADHD, Asperger's or bipolarness. I fit in all of those categories, Aaron, and what you've just said has really made me feel like I have a little bit more understanding as to why numbers and things mean so much to me. And like I said to you earlier on the phone before we came on the air, I can go down the road and I have these abilities thanks to Jordan Maxwell and understanding what sacred symbolism is, being able to recognize all these things and really being in a separate world than other people. Now, for some of these listeners, is there a way that we as civilians can get results of our DNA or find out if we are the prototype of what the government is looking for?
Well, you can do, you could go, you could pay the money, you could submit in a sample, you could get a DNA sample, but the DNA sample you're going to get is going to be very bare bones. They're not going to give you the true DNA samples that the NSA gets in their hands when every baby gets their blood drawn, and every baby that's born in the United States, their DNA goes into a database under the NSA, and so that all these projects under the shadow government have complete full access for reviewing, and they indeed do have a formula that they go by, so that they can actually determine by the time, right when the baby's born, sometimes beforehand, of what this child, what their abilities are, what they're going to be capable of, what they can be molded into. So it's very difficult, but I will say this. There has been a huge rise in the medical field of diagnosis with not just autism and Asperger's, but with all of these personality disorders that fall under chromosome 13. And in the past, really, 15 years, there has been this massive market by pharma of all of these medicines to suppress depression, and all these companies are coming up with all this research for, all these, it's all pharma. They're trying to suppress, and here's why, because this goes on to a bigger picture. People are advancing, not just physically, but mentally, like what Dr. Deagle said, through the psychic DNA. It is happening faster and faster, more and more, and it's increasing. And the global elite is aware of this, and they're scared. So they know that people, the general public, is very much happy and comfortable with taking their pill, going to work, coming home, eating their fast food, and going to bed and doing it all over again. So my suggestion, there's a lot of different, much better metaphysical treatments out there for things like with the claim of Asperger's and autism. If a child has Asperger's, if it's the real Asperger's, you can see vast improvements just on basic diet change. There's information out there. Got to get away from the psychotropic pharmaceutical drugs. Be very careful about certain institutes approaching you, wanting to, evaluate your gifted child. Got to stay away from that. I personally can't stand the public school system because it is all mind-controlled based. Homeschooling.
Thank you very much.
Homeschooling is the only honest way to nurture and give the real food of life and of knowledge to your children these days. That is the absolute truth. Even private school is the same way.
And interrupting for a second there, the school system, I've told people before on my show, as I've done shows about this real mind control that people aren't aware of, that I really wanted to get into with you or Dave Corso and some of the other episodes, but they start you out at a level, a kindergarten level, let's say, and you're at the bottom of the totem pole, and you work your way up to maybe the 6th grade level, 5th or 6th grade level, and then before you know it, you were the top of the totem pole. Now you're knocked back down to the 6th or 7th grade until you work your way back up in junior high to the 8th grade level, and then in high school you get knocked back down to freshman level, work your way back up to senior, college, knocked back down, and this is all mind control, and it happens all the way into the employment division, whether you go through college or whatever road you take. It also happens through boot camp and through the military system. And this happens